Okay, guys, welcome to CrohnsCast Live for our next installment. And today we are with a CrohnsCast veteran, that is Vince Massa, who was one of our first interviewees on the show and on the podcast. Vince, just want to say hello to everybody.
How's it going? Good morning. I'm in the States, so it's still really early here.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, Vince is, what is it, 6 hours, 7 hours behind? Is it 6 a.m.
6 a.m. Yep, 6 a.m.
Yeah, 7 hours behind. Vince, the main thing that I've been focusing on, and you might have noticed as well, is the guests that I have been interviewing have mostly, well, in fact, the live content has entirely been male. And one of the things that triggered that was that a person in the United Kingdom was given permission to essentially not have life-saving surgery and was allowed to then therefore die in hospital. I think you're in the global IBD group that I'm in. And it kind of stirred a big debate for ostomy awareness, IBD awareness, and sort of support networks that are within those communities. And it was really shocking for us because we didn't realize that someone could be in a position where they weren't really aware of what was available and how life can be having an ostomy. And we felt like we maybe hadn't done enough, or that he was given the opportunity to, or hadn't explored it enough for him to have legally made a decision like that. It was one of those very strange, very emotional scenarios. And I do apologize if anybody who knows this person ends up watching this and feels that what I have just said is maybe out of turn. And I don't know what else to say other than I am speaking emotionally from a point of view, and I do not have all the facts, and I fully appreciate that I may have got it wrong in that statement. What are your thoughts, Vince, on the side of getting an ostomy and how that impacts life?
Well, I know the story that you're talking about, and that hit me pretty hard too, even though so far removed from the location. I kind of had the same attitude, not really that I wanted to die, but obviously when I was first diagnosed with Crohn's disease, that was a blow because I didn't fully understand at the time. I didn't have a lot of resources to understand what that meant. And slowly, as I started getting more and more details from either my doctor or connecting with other people that had the same disease, things began to become a bit clearer as to exactly how bad it was, but also how it wasn't that really bad at all. I mean, yeah, it brought up a lot of new challenges. Flash forward, what was it, 15, 16 years where things had degraded to the point where I had to get the ostomy. When they told me I had to get an ostomy, I cried because that in my mind is like, that's it. There is no turning back from this. My life is over. This is going to impact everything. It's going to impact the way that I'm going to be able to provide for my family, the interactions that I have. I pictured that I was going to be stuck within 5 feet of a bathroom for the rest of my life. I think the biggest difference came from getting details from people that had had one before. And my doctor was actually really good about it. And he was helping to explain, look, there are a lot of people that are famous that you don't even know that have an ostomy. And so that helped a lot because you start looking around and trying to figure out, okay, it isn't as awful as you think. And I hate saying this because this is one of those trite terms, at least in my opinion over here, somehow that you can raise the awareness to the people that have to go through this and get them in touch with the communities, like the services that you're providing, to let people know that this is not the end. And what makes my heart break for that poor man is the fact that I wonder, was he aware of the group of people that are out there that are in the same situation, the struggles that they went through, and what that means for them, and what that would mean for him as well? I just wonder if that would help to maybe cushion the blow of what he had to go through, and then also possibly change his mind.
Yeah, and I think like we rallied together at that point, and we created a video,
Right.
trying to sort of help anyone else going into that situation that they might find it, talking about that you're not alone, and trying to sort of show a bit of positivity about what life with an ostomy is like, or life after having surgical intervention for IBD or any other sort of chronic disease or critical illness. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I just find it such a difficult thing to sort of adjust to. You touched on your own story slightly there, and what do you think? Like at that time when they turned on and things were shaping up badly health-wise for you, and ostomy started to become a real option. What was it that was going through your head? What was making you that tearful? Like how could you? What was the rationale behind your fears? Are you able to tap into that?
The rationale was, and because I'd never actually spoken with anybody that had an ostomy before, I wasn't really familiar with what was involved with it, the type of equipment or hardware that you had to use in order to support it. So the wafers, the bags, anything that went along with that. The only thing that I was aware of is that they were, and I'd been through multiple bowel resection surgeries at that point, but it's all internal. I mean, you wake up, you've got staples, and then you've got the recovery process, but everything is still inside. So realizing that you're going to be ported out through your stomach with something attached to your stomach in order to catch the waste, it was hard to comprehend. I didn't think that it was going to be practical. And again, like I said, I thought it was going to be the sort of thing like, okay, you have to gingerly step up from your chair and tiptoe around the room. Otherwise, this thing's going to come off and it's going to be like a poop fire hose going off around the room. So I was thinking the worst. I didn't have the education. I didn't understand. Obviously, my GI doc, it wasn't that he was not taking it seriously, but since he had the familiarity and he knew, and he actually had patients who had gone through it and were still runners and were still doing all sorts of activities, to him, he understood exactly what the impact was. And so in my mind, maybe it was, like this. In his mind, he knows that in reality, the impact is very, very minor. And the benefits that it was going to bring back to my life, I had no idea at that point. I'd been living for about a year and a half and 2 years in almost a constant flare. Energy levels were low. Couldn't really keep anything in my system. Pain, bloating. And so I had no idea the relief and the normalcy that it was going to return to my life. And yeah, so you do have to worry about having the correct appliances on hand. But beyond that, there's no way I'd go back. In fact, I think I mentioned to you in the original interview when I qualified, and it's ironic that I'm wearing the shirt today. I pulled it out of the drawer in the dark as I was coming downstairs. When I had qualified for Boston, and my training happened to, I had a bowel resection 6 months before I was supposed to run. And prior to that, the doctor was actually talking about doing a reversal. When I looked at it, I thought, I'm not going to do it. I'll stick with the bag because I didn't want to interrupt the progress that I'd had in order to go back to normal, because it would have meant that I would have missed the race. And so I think it's the best decision that I made, honestly. If it means routing everything back inside my guts, and getting rid of the bag, but I'm going to go back to all of those symptoms that I had before, I'll stick with the bag. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, after the fact, that becomes a very real reality.
Right.
Because symptomatic wise, life is so much better, almost instantaneously. Just to touch on your pre-ostomy, and where were you in your life at that point? What was happening? How did you feel as a man? I don't know what your lifestyle predicament was at the time. I don't know whether you were the sole earner for your household, if you were married or anything like that. And how did that make you feel? Where did that put you in? What mental space did that put you into?
I've been the sole earner in the house for probably the last 17 years. When we had our first son, my wife quit her job pretty rapidly after that because she wanted to stay at home with him. I wasn't very active at that time. I mean, I traveled a lot for work, but it was worry. It was concern. I didn't want to have to put my wife into a position where if I was going to be unable to work or provide a living, that would have made me feel even worse. Because it's like, okay, number one, it's bad enough I've got the disease, but number two, if that means that I'm now a burden on her, that makes things even worse. So it was an additional, thing to worry about at that time.
Did it make you feel like potentially you were less of a man, and did the prospect of surgery make you feel that that was an even greater risk?
I didn't really feel like I was less of a man, because in this case, it wasn't anything that I could control. The disease just kind of happened. So it was trying to find the best way to deal with it and the best way to structure things so that it would have the least bit of impact on my ability to earn, and also her having to take care of me as well as having to take care of the kids. And I've seen that every time that I've gone through surgery, is that I'm trying to find and do what I can so that my downtime is minimized as much as possible, so that, again, it doesn't really impact her and the way that the household works. I don't want to be, and maybe that does come down to that male pride, where it's like, I should be able to take care of myself so that also I can take care of you guys. I don't want to have that situation reverse where it's like I'm now a burden. So I know that sounds stupid, but that's the way the mind works.
But it's a really interesting point, and I'm sure there are countless people out there who would feel the same way. What's really interesting is that you feel that you would be a burden, and just like, what is it about being vulnerable as a man that we find so difficult? Like for you, the thought of not being able to provide for or asking your family to provide for themselves, right, and you, like what is it about our makeup that makes us need to have that control, so to speak? I don't know if you're able to put your point of view across on that.
I think it's the way that the family has been structured forever. Is that it's expected that the man is supposed to go out and provide, and the woman is supposed to nurture, because that's kind of what biologically we're geared towards. And I'm sure I'm probably going to get beaten up for saying that, because it's fallen out of favor in the last few years. But there are definite things that I can do better than my wife, and there's other things that she can do certainly better than I can. So looking at it, it's just the idea that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm somehow letting them down because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. If it was a situation where, like, unfortunately, some of the people that have been in accidents or combat veterans, where they come back and they don't have their arms and legs, and it's not something that they can physically do. I don't know. It seems like, again, that wouldn't be letting me off the hook, so to speak. But in this situation, maybe because it is such a disease that you can't see, it's like, come on, there's no excuse. You should be able to, you look fine. You should be able to drag your butt up out of bed and get going. I know you don't feel like you have a lot of energy, but you look fine. What's the problem? So I don't know. I haven't really thought a whole lot about that. I've always just judged it as, this is what I should be doing. This is my responsibility. Mm-hmm. I need to do it.
You mentioned that you were, obviously there was a fear factor about having to gingerly go about your life, and the necessity, or what do you call it? The thought of not being able to be far from a bathroom.
Yeah.
And it's, so the fear factor for life, beyond the sort of means, like as in terms of being able to earn money and support your family, was there an element of society's view of you as a man, or was it an element of your view of you and what you should do as a man that impacted you? Like, which one was the bigger pull?
It's personal. I mean, there's been a long time, and I came to terms with this a long time ago, that I'm not like the stereotypical guy, at least from our area's viewpoint. Not big into sports. Do a lot of things traditionally that guys around the house don't do. And so basically that's never really bugged me that much. Now, there was a little bit of pressure in the back of my head. Like if, well, neighbors or people that we know have that idea, like, well, I don't understand why aren't you going to work? Why aren't you able to go out and like mow the lawn or something like that? But that wasn't the thing. My biggest concern is always my wife, number one, and the family. That's it. So that was where my primary focus was. How is this going to impact them? What sort of burden is it going to place on her? And again, how can I alleviate that?
Yeah, totally. And what was there a point before surgery where you were able to accept that this was a sensible choice?
Yes, it got to the point that I had no energy. I had no energy. I had been going through all sorts of medications and side effects, and I was done. And so it was that point, it was like, okay, I either have to do this, or essentially I thought I was going to die because nothing was going to work. And I was just tired. And so I just thought like, okay, it's either this or the void. So I just said, okay, let's do it. Whatever. I'm done. I'm tired. Let's see if it works.
And how long was that process for you between the point where you had sort of started to talk about having an ostomy and the reality of getting an ostomy became absolute? Like how long was that process for you?
Well, every time that I'd had the surgeries, the bowel resections or got admitted into the hospital, that was always something that the doctor had brought up. He's like, okay, so here's what we need to do next. Here's what we need to try. Here's the medication that we need to put you on. And, hopefully this will help put it into remission and you'll be fine. But if it doesn't, we've got these other options to go through. And then ultimately we'd be looking at an ostomy. And as time went on, that list of, okay, here's the next thing that we'll try got smaller and smaller and smaller. And so then finally, once that final medication that he had me on failed and I wasn't getting any better, and you can't stay on super high doses of prednisone and these massive doses of antibiotics, he's like, okay, it's time. Ostomy. Sure.
Hi there. Hey, buddy. Sorry. Yeah. I'm just on a podcast, that's all.
Oh, that's all right. No worries.
Thank you very much.
Something to hold on. This. That's a good shot.
The joys of podcasting amateurishly. Just had a delivery at the front door. I was like, oh. Yeah, I think that's really important. Part of everyone's journey is that realization sometimes of going through all the bits and pieces, because sometimes we don't really think. Like I don't know anybody who has ever started their IBD journey with all the answers, with all the sort of information and an understanding of how common things are. It's not until after the fact that we realize, actually, I'm not a weirdo. I'm not a...
Well, hang on.
I'm not that person who is on their own with all of this. And it's just like how many, since your surgery, what was the first few days like, waking up, having an ostomy, and like how was that for you? How was your adjustment to that?
Obviously every time you come out of surgery, you've got the various aches and pains from especially as the painkillers start wearing off in the first 6 hours. You start being aware of exactly where they cut you and how bad it is. What's strange, and I don't know why they do this, and I don't know if this is the way it is for your medical system over there. For some reason, when you come out of ostomy surgery here, at least it was for me, the bag that they had on me was completely clear. And so you have this huge, bruised, bloody, it looks like a smashed tomato for the ostomy. And it's got the stomach fluids coming out of it. It's awful. And so that was the primary amount of time that I spent when I was in there, is you look at it and it's like, what in the heck did they do to me? And this is horrible. That was the initial thing. Once once I got over that, my concern is just getting the heck out of the hospital. What do I have to do in order to get released, to start going? And then being exposed to, well, okay, this isn't the only, setup that you have to have for your bag. And it failed a couple of times too while I was in there. And so that was a concern. Then started getting education of the different solutions that are available. There's obviously some products that work better for me than they do for other people. And so at that point, it was just, okay, how do I make this better? What's the absolute best way to approach it? But at first, it was weird. It was really strange. Oh yeah, it seems that yours is frozen. Looks like there you go. Now it's back.
And we're back. We're back in.
And now it's Instagram.
It's quite I think it's back on now.
There we go.
It's quite an interesting thing when you first wake up. I think there's so much adjustment to the whole thing as well. And this might sound, you don't have to answer this question because it is quite a personal question.
You're breaking up again.
On the phone or just? Let's end that one. End the video. Share to IGTV. Next.
Whoops. Yep, got kicked off.
It's coming back on now. This is fun. I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, the Instagram feed failed. There we go.
You should be back in any second, is it? Is it coming up on the Instagram? Is it not live yet on Instagram? Can you hear me?
Sorry, plug back in the computer. The feed on the Instagram broadcast failed.
Okay. I've just gone live again.
Gotcha.
On it, so it should be on there, hopefully.
Let's see.
What I like at the minute with the live stuff is that the things that I'm seeing from professionals is just as good as mine. It seems that everyone has these technological hiccups when they go live. I think you need a full TV studio suite to be able to...
Serious. Well, again, and that's the serious cash, right?
Yeah. Backroom staff.
Yeah, seriously, a producer would be wonderful. Yeah, I'm not seeing you live right now. See that it ended.
And that. Delete that one. Okay, I'm doing it again.
There we go.
Hurrah.
Okay, so I'm watching it. There we go. Request.
Well, that was fun.
All right.
So for anybody that's watching this later on Facebook, we're having a few technical hiccups with the It keeps kicking you out for some reason. Having a few technical hiccups with Instagram. Maybe we'll just leave it on Instagram. All right, hold on. We're in. No, it's not liking it, is it? Okay.
I'll reboot the phone, see if that helps.
That's all right. We'll just leave it on Instagram.
Okay. Sorry.
That's all good. So yeah, I think that's if we get back to where we were talking about waking up with the ostomy, was there ever any concerns? And again, like you don't need to answer this question if you don't feel comfortable, but was there any concerns almost from a vanity perspective of like how your wife would view you or how you would feel half naked or whatever for whatever things, or relationships with your partner and things like that? Was that ever a concern?
Not really. I mean, the other concern that I had, because I typically tend to dwell in the moment. Okay, what is the most immediate thing that I need to deal with and get over, which is, like I said, getting out of the hospital. What do I have to do to get out of there? And then at that point, what do I have to do to get back to the point that I might be able to move around? Once I was finally recovered enough to start thinking about that again, it was just the mechanics of the situation, because the bags themselves they're not tiny. I mean, they're, pretty good size. They make a lot of noise. And also, depending on where your ostomy is placed, that could be problematic as well. So it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it wasn't the primary concern. I wasn't really worried about it. I figured that we'd make it work somehow. So, and, we had our last child after I had my ostomy. So we obviously figured it out. So not to be worried about it.
But it's one of those things. I guess you can understand why people would feel like that. What would you say to somebody who is concerned about their sort of body image post-surgery and about having relationships with a partner?
Yeah, I can see how that would be a challenge for some. I think the biggest thing, and it goes back to your original question, is the perception, especially if you haven't been exposed to this situation before, what's involved with it. I think the key is being able to somehow connect with people who've been there and done that, gone through this experience, and get that feedback as to what exactly is involved. One of the most common questions that I'll see on the Facebook groups that we're part of is people asking like, hey, what sort of bags or other materials are out there to allow for those sorts of situations? It wasn't until, I don't know, a number of years after I'd had the surgery that we found out that there's products out there that are stoma caps. Essentially, they're these little tiny bags that they're about this big, maybe a fifth of the size of the normal bag, and I don't know if they're typically used for bathing or whatever, but it's a great alternative because it covers the stoma. It will catch any sort of material that may come out, provided that you don't have a huge outflow. But it's something that works and keeps the bag out of the way. Previously, what I'd been doing, and gosh, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, is medical tape. Is I would take the bag and tape it, roll it up and then tape it in order to hold it in place and keep it out of the way. So there's lots of solutions. I mean, this is not a new medical procedure at all. And so it's been around for a long time. It's not something that's well known or talked about, but there's lots of alternatives and there's lots of things out there to help you continue living your life while also enjoying the benefits that this sort of surgery will actually bring to you. So I that's my question, and that's what I keep thinking about during our entire conversation here, is like for that fellow over in the UK, is that there has to be a way, because the doctors deal with this every day. This is the world that they live in. This is something that they exist with. But they have to find some way to help the new patient or someone that's not exposed to it connect with those groups or connect with those people so that they can understand what exactly is involved with this new life and that it's not over. If there was some way that he could have connected with the community sooner or earlier, maybe there was more that we could have done to help him understand, hey, this is not the be all end all. This is not the end of the road. I don't know if that would have changed anything, but I think anytime that you feel like you're completely alone, it's makes any situation so much harder. If you feel like there's somebody that's gone through it, and they know what you're experiencing, I think that relieves a lot of the pressure, and you feel like you've got that spark of hope that I've got a resource. I've got somebody that understands where I'm at. And maybe that would have made a difference. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. What has been, so for your own experience, what was the biggest moment for you in terms of finding support and feeling less alone? Like, where did you find it, and who introduced it to you?
There were groups that I was made aware of through the hospital. After I was discharged, like, oh yeah, there's a group that meets once a month that talks about the ostomy stuff. I reached out to the people that ran it, and I heard back once, but they weren't really sure when they were going to be meeting again. Honestly, for me, it was Facebook. I found that there were community groups out there. It was a Crohn's group, and then more detailed, a specific ostomy group that once I got in and started lurking and reading the posts, that I started finding out that, oh, wow, okay, there's some good information here. And these are people that, again, are going through a lot of the same stuff that I went through. Unfortunately, that was about 2.5, 3 years after I had the surgery. So I had to figure out a lot of stuff out on my own. But I just looked at it like, okay, this is what I have to deal with, so deal with it. But then once I found those groups, I saw that there was a lot of stuff that I'd gone through, got some really good tips. But it's also motivated me to kind of come out of my shell a little bit and try to reply to people when they've got the questions. Hey, I'm having this, or I'm just having the surgery, or even just offering encouragement. Hey, it's not a big deal. You'll get through this. We're here to help you. People that post that, hey, I'm getting my surgery reversed, congratulate them. Let them know that's awesome. That's I hope it works out for you in the long run. So again, just being more involved, I think, is what the biggest thing that brought to me. So again, how do you make people aware of this stuff? How do you get that word out that there's a support group for you available?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. What sort of things, how did you find the Ostomy Athletes group on Facebook? Because that's how we connected.
Yeah. You know what? I think it was just a recommendation that came through Facebook. Oh, no, I know what it was. It was in one of the other ostomy groups that I was in. And at that time, that was when I was really, really deep into running. And somebody had posted a question about running, and I had responded. And when we started talking about diet, I think, and then I brought the fact that, oh, well, I actually have a bag. And so I'm looking at this situation. And somebody suggested, oh, well, there's actually an athletic ostomy group. I'd never heard of it before. And so I went and petitioned, got accepted, and then boom, lots of relevant information for my interest at that time.
And it is a pretty amazing group. At that time for you, was that in itself a big moment, or was that just a nice to have? Like, how did that make you feel?
It was a big moment because, again, I thought that I was only aware of one other person, and that was through my doctor's office, because I'd been, in close contact with the doctor as I was upping my mileage and trying to, take on different races, longer races. And without, it's okay, government HIPAA laws, he didn't reveal any information. He just let me know in a roundabout way that there was another patient that he had that she was in the exact same situation that I was. She had a bag, she had a very limited diet, she was a runner, she was a marathoner. And so he was just letting me know that, yeah, this can be done. Don't worry about it. You approach it wisely. But then being able to, but he couldn't refer me to who she actually was, because it'd be a violation of, privilege. So when I found the group, that was huge, because here's people that I could actually talk to and connect to, and we could share information. And so that was amazing. And what's nice is that the ostomy athletes, it's not all just sports all the time. So you also talk about the disease and other things as well, equipment, whatever. So that was nice. It's been a huge resource. It's been awesome.
Mm-hmm. And back to your sort of thoughts, like how do you think we could find a way to be more accessible as a community?
I don't know if it's short. I'm because I don't understand how the algorithms on Facebook work. I mean, I see them. There's advertising, but especially as a group, a support group that we've got here, is it something that they can provide free advertising for the groups? I don't know. The only thing that comes to mind immediately is talking to your doctor and letting them know that situation and say like, hey, these things are available. Can we put up a flyer or something so that people know that this stuff is out there, how to connect? Other than that, short of an advertising campaign, I'm not really certain how we get that stuff out. I don't know. What are your ideas? How have you found that people are coming and finding you? Is it just strictly word of mouth? Is your stuff promoted? How's it distributing? How's it getting around?
I think it's just covering sort of multiple facet approach. So it's looking into existing groups and just communicating through there. So like what I've noticed is that a lot of Facebook groups, people ask lots of questions that are relevant to sort of IBD. And if I feel that an episode, for example, has answered that, then I'll share that episode with them. I think from my experience, awkwardly, is that it actually might be slightly better or easier in the UK to find support with relations to IBD and having ostomies and stuff like that. Because we've got a few organizations like Crohn's Colitis UK, but it's only what I find is particularly, I don't really know if it's prevalent to those who are just getting diagnosed and whether or not the information, because I'm already there.
Right.
It's difficult to know whether or not people that are new to the disease are actually being directed to those groups or being informed about those groups. We have a stoma nurse who gets assigned to you when you have your ostomy in hospital, and they're kind of like a local font of knowledge, and they will give you information about local support groups. They'll give you information about local charities and companies that work alongside the NHS to give you certain things. So a lot of my friends that I've met through Global IBD, through doing CrohnsCast, they like Salts, which is a company that produces ostomy bags. And they are, I believe, a UK-based company, but originally, or to my knowledge, whenever I had my ostomy, it was Coloplast that provided all of the ostomy stuff, from sprays to bags and belts and whatnot.
Right.
And I had never heard of Salts, and I thought that these were self-purchased things, and I didn't realize that you could actually get all these. And it's only recently that I found out that you can get all of this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think in the UK with the NHS, we have a slight advantage. But again, I don't think it's good enough. I don't think that enough people are aware of the support that's available to them. And from chatting with other people who knew more details of the case in question, the care, from my understanding, was that there wasn't enough support for that person, which is really bad, because that could have really factored in the decision-making process.
Support from the state or support from family, friends, the community? What support wasn't there enough of?
There wasn't enough, from my understanding, support from the healthcare team potentially because he had a temporary stoma and he did not adjust well. Now, whether or not that's the care that the NHS trust that was dealing with it, I don't know if there's blame lies anywhere, or if it's just one of those serendipitous situations where there is no blame. But from my understanding, either the trust in itself was highly stretched at the time. I mean, bear in mind as well, like, we were going through coronavirus.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not they were too stretched to be able to deal with the situation, or whether or not the support network there lies a gap. I know that Bryony, who is another person that I follow on Instagram, and I don't know if she works for the BBC or not, but she just done a recent article for BBC News talking about mental health and IBD. And it's not until actually reading her article I realized how much mental health plays. I mean, mental health is obviously quite a big topic currently anyway, but it wasn't until that article that I realized how much mental health actually might impact people with chronic disease, and in particular IBD. And it was certainly seemed to be true in this case, because ultimately, when you boil down all the facts, this person's had adjustment disorder, or that's a diagnosis, and I'm not qualified to give that diagnosis. But if you read into the case, he has very similar symptoms which could result in an adjustment disorder diagnosis from a mental health professional, and he didn't receive the support to help him adjust. But I don't know, how do you feel sort of about mental health and its relationship with IBD? Do you feel that it's a big factor? You can talk from personal experience, or you can talk from your perception of the world.
There's certainly been times where I've gotten depressed over the situation, especially when this year has been a little bit of a challenge, just because of the medication that I'm on. The medication that you have to have has been so expensive, and trying to figure out and work around and sort out how to actually provide for this biologic that is just, astronomical in cost for each time that you have to take it. I don't know. And I'm trying to think, it may be just because of my own personal experience. I'm trying to think the last time that my doctor has asked pointedly, how's your mental health? But that's just not his personality. And we do have this sort of relationship that we've known each other for over 25 years, that I'm not certain if that's something that he would have to ask. I know that we talk about a number of things: family, life, what's going on, job. So that may be the way that he works with it. Personally, there have been, as I said, several times where I've gotten depressed, talked about the diagnosis when it said, okay, it's time to have an ostomy, how that hit me. But beyond that, there's enough that I have to worry about and take care of on a day-to-day basis that's not my primary concern. And I know that sounds really bad, but for me, it hasn't been a big deal. Knock on wood.
Yeah, and that's a really positive place to be. And I think those of us that are not struggling with issues with our mental health in terms of relating to our IBD or just life in general, we are exceptionally fortunate. Like, what would your advice be to someone who is potentially struggling with their diagnosis or with the prospect of ostomy surgery?
First things, you've got to reach outside yourself. And I know that's difficult, especially if you're not in a place where you feel like you've got any value or there's no hope. But there are people out there. The best thing to do is to, on their part, if you're in that situation, don't give up hope. Try to find somebody that you can talk to. But then that also swings the light around towards us who are not in that space currently. We've got to do what we can by engaging with people on social media and the groups that we're in, friends that may have been newly diagnosed, and stepping outside of our safe space and trying to reach out to them and let them know that, hey, we've been here, we've been through it. Let me know how I can help. And here's my experience. Or what do you need? Do you just need to talk? Do you need to vent? Are you having frustrations with something else? So, and as we've been going through the conversation here, that makes me want to go out onto the groups that we're part of and actually start this conversation now. Hey, how can we help people that are new to the situation find out about this stuff? How do we spread the message, and how do we help other people?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the more that we do in that vein, the better it'll be. One of the things I've noticed within our IBD Global Ostomates and IBD Mates group is the prevalence of TikTok currently being used to try and spread positivity around having IBD, and trying to move it away from it feeling like a life sentence and more of it's something that can be part of your life, but it doesn't have to be the be all and end all.
Right.
And there's been some incredible TikToks. I mean, TikTok currently is on trend. It exploded over Instagram for those that follow other people like within the business world. It's been building for a significant amount of time, but certainly in the last 3 months, TikTok has absolutely exploded, and seeing some of the things on there has been hilarious. And it's just, people from all walks of life experiencing IBD in their own way, but being able to put a humorous element onto it or just talking about it. For me, one of the strangest things I hear most common is people struggling to talk to someone who doesn't have IBD and who doesn't have an ostomy. For me, it's slightly different because I'm generally that character where I feel that I am unique. I kind of lean into that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But whenever I had my ostomy, that became my main talking point, and that was usually something that would not be far from the first thing that I would be speaking to people about whenever I would meet them.
But was that because it's something that you felt like you had to explain? For if you have to go to the bathroom every 25 minutes, excuse yourself and go find a restroom? Or is it because of when you had your bag noises that would happen? Or was it something that it's like, hey, this is what's going on. This is something that I experience.
Yeah, I think a mixture generally of all of those points. Initially, certainly it was, I'd been in hospital for a couple of months at that point.
Whoa.
So then I returned to work, or returned back to normal life, and it was like, where have you been? Where have you been for 2 months? So that kind of helped explain the process. It wasn't like I was just on a swan down the beach somewhere. Beyond that, I think the initial sort of, well, this is me, and I've got to, there's no point in hiding it, was my sort of mental thoughts about the situation that I found myself in. And then just by talking to people that I knew initially about having an ostomy and essentially talking about the elephant in the room made it then become less of a taboo. And I think that sometimes when you make a topic such as this, which is impacting all aspects of your life already, when you make that a taboo topic, when you make it something that you're maybe not comfortable about, then it can become a bigger burden or a bigger issue whenever certain things like the noises or the constant maybe needing to get up to go to empty the bag, that then becomes a social issue and a construct of your own personal experience. And it can be like, I remember at the time I was working at Headley Court, and we would do admissions where there would be 2 or 3 of us clinicians in a bay assessing a patient, and we're going through and getting this patient's laundry list of medical complaints or issues, or essentially getting the download for what they're there to see us for. And all you would hear is random gargling, fart noises coming, and it would be like, I'd be like, I would look at sometimes ways that I would not consume certain foods, or I would not particularly want to do an assessment at a certain time of day because, but yeah, at the same time, then I guess I did struggle with that initially, because this was a person that I was meant to be professional in front of, and that, I guess, had an impact, because then I was like, oh, and I would try and hold the bag. I'd try and stick my finger literally in my stomach to stop it from making noises.
Which doesn't really work out the way you expect it to.
No. Yeah. And then it just kind of just started to become, why am I hiding this? Like, this isn't something that's going to go away. And it became part of almost an in-joke within the teams that I worked in. And also it became a little bit of a just a thing that I would just tell people. I would just excuse, like if you randomly farted as a normal person, you would excuse yourself. So whenever things like that were happening, I'd just be like, excuse me, sorry, my stomach is just making a bit of a noise.
Right.
And it just clears the air. Do you know what I mean? It really just clears the air. I'm like, oh, how have you found it? Because I know you've found CrossFit. And I know you're a heavily practitioner of your Christian faith as well. Yep. And both of those sections of society can sometimes feel to people that are new to these experiences as societies that have certain views on these types of things. Like I know a Christian society in our mind's eye is a welcoming society, but sometimes people feel like when all of a sudden their life becomes different, that society in itself might reject themselves. And then CrossFit is a very physical place, and people tend to work with their tops off, particularly blokes.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. From the Christian standpoint, I remember the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that the only thing that I do different now with the bag is that if I'm in a meeting, especially with a limited number of people, like if we're in a leadership meeting and we're discussing things, especially if they're not familiar with who I am, I'll do kind of like what you do. I'll kind of set the stage and say, hey, just so you know, got Crohn's disease, I've got an ostomy because of it. And so if you see me through the meeting holding my bag or muffling, I said, it's not that I'm in pain, because I've had people notice that and say like, are you experiencing pain or anything? Do you need a break? And it's like, no, I'm just trying to muffle this a little bit. I'll just, like you say, clear the air, set the stage. This is what I've got. Not a big deal. If you hear anything, that's what it is. Can't control it. So whatever, we'll go on. From the support standpoint, when I was going through the surgery, we got lots of help and support from the ward members and from our neighbors, because they have compassion. They understand what you're going through, and they love our family. And so they're trying to help that out. So that hasn't been a big deal. From the CrossFit standpoint, you're right. There are guys that will like pop off their shirts even during the warm up. And on the one hand, it's like, really, come on. But on the other hand, for me, I don't like doing that just because it exposes the bag. Also, the shirt helps control it and keep it in place. And for a lot of people at the gym, unless I'm doing something like handstand push-ups, they might not even be aware that there is a bag. We've got a very close community there as well. Go to the same classes every morning at 6:30. And so those guys know who I am. They know what I'm about. And unless you're actually working next to somebody or you've had those conversations, they may not even know. I, of course, discussed it with my coach when I first started joining, saying, hey, just FYI, be aware. This is what I've got, so that he can program appropriately. But nowadays, it's not even a concern. You just go and do it. So I think the point that you made is, don't be ashamed of it. It's not something that that you're doing on purpose. When you're talking about the noise, it is what it is. It's like, would you apologize if you had, I don't know, if you were, if you had vision problems? Would you apologize if you were going bald, as silly as that sounds? It's your body. Not everybody's the same, so don't worry about it. And for the most part, people don't care. They don't really care. I mean, it could be a topic of conversation and a way for you to share information. And most of the times when I speak with people, they'll come back with, oh yeah, I've got a cousin who has that, or I knew so-and-so, or our neighbor had it. And it's something to talk about. So it's a lot more common than we realize. It's just not spoken about a lot because it's your guts. So it's not a very pretty topic.
Yeah, I think that's so true as well, that once you actually start talking about it, the reality is that it is quite a common disease, not necessarily an ostomy, but certainly people with IBD. Sure. And I think I might have mentioned before in previous conversations about where I was working. It wasn't really ever something that I was proactively talking about until I ended up having to have a stoma, because there wasn't really any, it was then common knowledge. It was then, this guy's been missing from work for 2 months and this is why. And so everyone knew. And because everyone knew, then the frequency would surprise me of interaction with other patients with IBD that were visiting the military hospital was quite significant, was a lot higher than what I was aware of prior to me ending up with a stoma. And because all the nursing teams knew me and I worked there, they then started referring these people to me for conversation. It would just be like conversations over coffees and stuff.
Sure.
And it was, I think maybe in a military field, it was slightly more, there was a slightly bigger fear factor in terms of that feeling of vulnerability. And like, it's something I notice a lot with guys that are injured and that have life-changing injuries through, be it combat injuries or be it just your general road traffic accidents, or even something more benign like falling off a piece of furniture whilst inebriated. These life-changing situations, you know, they can take a lot of your life away, or it can feel like it's taking a lot of your life away. And that in itself, irrespective of the situation that you're in, can make you feel very vulnerable. And maybe, and I don't know whether I'm speaking a term, but maybe in a military community, we tend to be have quite a lot of bravado, have quite a lot of identity linked with being strong, independent type of people, you know, like alpha male or alpha person, because we've got women obviously in the military as well. And to not be able to realize that anymore, or feel that you're not able to realize that part and lose almost your identity as that person that you thought you were, can be extremely scary. And all of a sudden, like, you know, these people are dependent on others to get them in and out of a bath or onto a toilet or a bed, and that is huge. And then again, like from the IBD aspect as well, is like, I don't know whether or not being in that hospital for some patients with minor injuries or medical concerns was more difficult, or was made more difficult because of the other end of the extreme, where you've got patients that are having life-changing injuries that are more visible. And I think that's the main point, that the injuries are visible, and therefore you're able to, like, we're able to assimilate more sympathy or empathy towards someone who has got a significant visual impairment. And it's really interesting, actually, the discussion that we would have quite regularly. Never did we resolve it, but it was like looking at the drawdown of combat operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the increased incidence then of patients being admitted that were normal peacetime injuries that were massively impacting their lives, you know, resulting in ostomies, resulting in loss of manhood bits and things like that. Because all these injuries still happen, they just don't happen in front of an enemy.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there are road traffic accidents that hold up hospitals. But what was an interesting one was the people, there was a very definite different mindset of people that were injured in normal everyday life incidents, and the mental attitude of people that died on, not died, the mental attitude of people that were significantly injured on operations in the face of enemy. And it was almost like the people that were injured in peacetime didn't feel that they were owed's the wrong word. They didn't feel special. They felt that they were a burden.
Right.
Not saying that people with
but
they felt
like
that their purpose
they shouldn't be there. Like maybe it wasn't. It's the perception of, is it genuine? Let's put it that way. I guess maybe this isn't as important as my injury. The reason why I'm here isn't as important as somebody that was, you know, in combat. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. But I think that goes back to, we all do that ourselves anyway. We judge ourselves really, really harshly. Oh, I don't deserve that. Well, I'm just being overly dramatic. Oh, well, I shouldn't be worried about that, or I shouldn't be feeling sorry for myself for that situation.
Yeah, and I think that is potentially one of the biggest factors for people with IBD, be it mild or extreme. And I remember actually having a conversation with a lady called Crohn's mummy of Owen, who's socially become a really good friend on Instagram and groups like that. And I was just chatting with her because we'd started this group. It was predominantly ostomy focused, but I've got a J pouch now. And I kind of felt like a little bit of an imposter And I was chatting with her, and she's had like 50 odd surgeries because of her Crohn's disease. And I mean, she's a beautiful person, and to look at as well. She's a very beautiful girl. And I was just like, I've only had this. This is where it's weird, because, and people will, I'm assuming, identify with this as well. But I was like, I've only had 3 surgeries, and I felt that I hadn't suffered enough to warrant.
There's still time. I mean, if you want to sign up for a few more just to join that club, go right ahead. But I think it's from a perception standpoint where we start again in all sorts of ways. We want to judge ourselves against other people, and you can't in anything. Everybody has their own circumstances and their own situations and their own experiences. That's where you've got to be able to have that balance where it's like, okay, maybe I haven't gone through that same sort of extreme that she has, but what you've experienced, you compare that to somebody that doesn't have IBD and doesn't have those sorts of surgeries behind them. Does that make you better than them? Does that make you more of a surgical warrior than they are? I mean, because you've been through that pain of the surgery, but maybe they haven't. So it all comes down to perception, I think, and just being open and able to, even if you haven't been through that exact circumstance or been through everything they have, you can still relate with them. And I'm sure she doesn't look at you like you are a lesser individual just because you haven't gone through all of that stuff. And I'm speaking out of turn here, but I'm pretty sure she wouldn't wish that on anybody, the stuff that she's gone through. Yeah, it shaped her and made her a better person, probably. But I mean, would you legitimately look at someone and say, man, I think what would really help you at this point is if you had a bowel resection. If you were going to experience that, that's what you need to turn your life around. I understand. I understand what you're saying, but I also think that you need to kind of look at it for where it's at and just realize that that's a little silly. That's the way that I look at it.
And that's the thing is, like, whenever you sit down and consider, like, so much stuff that I'm reading, like, around sort of spirituality and sort of the power of the mind and all those kind of topics at the minute, you know, like the Eckhart Tolle type stuff.
I'm not familiar with that.
Russell Brand as well, which blew my mind. Like, up until recently, Russell Brand was a crazy sort of celebrity who had a very promiscuous sort of attitude towards life, and obviously had all the issues that celebrities tend to do whenever they are exploded into fame. Right. Has become quite a significant spiritual person, and
really?
Has a really interesting podcast as well, where he has some excellent guests. But just looking into all of that stuff, and it really has sort of changed sort of my mind about how I view things. And one of the main things it talks about is comparison, and comparison being the root of all evil.
Yep.
And essentially, just like, when you compare yourself to other people or anything, you're removing the joy from yourself, because you're never, the grass is always going to look greener if you're going to compare it until you're in that grass, and then the other grass looks greener. And it's just basically removing your ability to have joy in your own life. And I wonder if that may be a bigger element, because our disease is also, generally speaking, invisible to most people. Again, it's a build-up possibly in our own heads, where we think more about what the other person thinks about us without actually having any grounds for that thought, and look at other people and be, that person's got it so much better. I mean, like, one of the fun things that we used to do was look at the big houses.
Yes.
And, we go past and go, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could? Wouldn't it be wonderful? How good would our life be if we lived in that house? But the reality is, if you watch TV, or watch Desperate Housewives, or you watch Pretty Little Lies, or whatever it was, those houses generally are really angry places to live. Not obviously all of them, but you don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You don't know what's going on.
It's the same way with people. You have no idea what's going on in their life. You have no idea what sort of challenges they're facing. In interactions with people, you know, if they're short with you or they're rude, yeah, they could be a jerk. That could be the way they are. But again, it could be the situation where maybe they've just got a huge crushing weight on their mind for their family or their financial situation or whatever, and they're not thinking. And so that's why for all the good that social media does, there's a lot of bad that comes with it as well. It's that comparison. It's that short, you know, staged selfie or whatever to put it out to the world like, oh, look how wonderful my life is. Okay, that's great. But it can also have a negative impact on people too. Well, why isn't my life like that? Why aren't I in that vacation spot? I had a conversation with somebody recently and they were talking about if there was one thing in the world that you could change, what would it be? And honestly, at the time, seeing all of the vitriol and everything that was coming across the screen, my response was, if I could make social media go away, that would be my wish. Just because of, for all the good that it does, it seems like it's starting to turn in the other direction, and it's getting to be more and more divisive and horrible, and so easy for people to just vent in the wrong way. So I think it's a really hard thing, and it's getting harder for us to do, to keep that perception of, we don't know everything that's going on. We don't know the situation that someone's in. If you want the benefit of the doubt and you're hoping that someone can look at you and give you a pass when you were bad, you've got to be able to turn around and do that same thing. And it's hard, even with trying to keep that mindset. I still find myself sometimes looking back on interactions that I've had during the day with people. And it's like, oh man, I could have done something better then, because now that I think about it, it's like, gosh, I had no idea what was going on with that guy at the time. So it's a constant struggle. It's a constant struggle. How do you get beyond just what the eye sees? And try to keep that in mind.
And I guess that's another element to it as well, is the remorsefulness that then follows whenever you don't perhaps portray yourself in your best light, or you haven't been accommodating for something that you were unaware of. It's a really interesting sort of spiral. Like we consume our thoughts. We almost project what we feel someone feels about us,
right?
Without actually, having reason for it. And then we have a remorse when we've missed the whole thing altogether. It's just like, I think my wife keeps talking about it at the minute. It's just like, if you're coming from a place of kindness, then right. nothing can be wrong with that.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing too. And the other thing is we've recently started a home-based business, and so we're trying to do some self-improvement with our directions and the attitudes and things like that. And a book that I was reading recently that was talking about is like, even if you do everything exactly perfect, fine, the right way, you're approaching with the right attitude, you have zero control over how somebody else is going to react. You could come to them with the nicest, most perfect cake and say, this is for you, out of the pureness of your heart. And you have no control over how they receive that. So what's the point of worrying about that? You be the best person you can be. You deal as justly as you can with somebody else. And then it's up to them how they're going to respond. And you have to be okay with that. That's the real trick, is that if they do have a negative reaction or how they come back to you, then it's up to you how you can respond to it. That's so hard. It's so hard being able to just let that go and say, I did what I could. And then that's their decision, and that's the way we have to proceed with it.
Yeah, no, totally. I've got a couple of questions before we start looking to wrap things up, because I'm conscious that your day is starting to slowly come in.
Kids will be waking up every time.
For guys watching or guys tuning in, what has been the hardest thing for you about getting or having an ostomy?
Honestly, it's dress clothes, because of having to be able to have the bag be to the point where it can fill up when it needs to, but then also having it so that you don't look like you are Tommy Boy and you've just rolled out of bed and, you're completely disheveled. Most of the time I'm in t-shirt and blue jeans or shorts. And so that's not a big deal. But when you're in church or you're in a really nice business meeting, that's an issue. But it's a convenience issue for me. That sounds really stupid, but that's the biggest challenge I have with that.
So when you're dressing, do you feel is it completely about the bag being able to be emptied or filled, or do you feel certain items of dress potentially exaggerate where the bag is, or is that
it can, and that's all vanity in that point. It's just whether or not it's like you've got your shirt tucked in, or do you have to have it pulled out a little bit to allow for the bag. There's especially if you cinch the bag down the type that I have, that if it's not brand spanking new out of the box, it crinkle, and so that gets to be annoying as well. But otherwise it's being able to get to it and take care of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, it can be awkward. I'm like, I didn't feel that I was ever sort of vain about my bag myself, but there would be certain times where for the love of God, I just want a t-shirt to fit properly. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, why?
Yeah,
and
vanity.
The weird thing is that nobody actually ever noticed. I was with my now wife for, I think, like I didn't meet her until after I'd had an ostomy.
Oh, wow.
And I think we'd been dating for 2 or 3 months. I can't be 2 or 3 months. She didn't recognize for a while that I had an ostomy.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was amazing to me that she didn't notice, and I actually had to say like, "Oh, you're grabbing my stomach, you're grabbing my bag," and it was just like, we were in one of these sort of embraces where we were cuddling each other,
right.
and she'd grabbed hold of the bag in itself. I was like, "You're grabbing?" She said, "Well, what do you mean I'm grabbing?" I'm like, "That's my ostomy bag. That's where my stoma pours."
That's awesome. Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, I didn't." I was like, might have been a couple of weeks, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks, rather than 2 or 3 months. That would be an exceptionally long time to not be aware of something like that.
Still, I mean, it lets you know exactly that it's not as big a deal as sometimes we make it out to be, or it's not the thing that people immediately focus on. So maybe we shouldn't focus on it that much either.
Yeah, it is amazing, like how, again, it all boils down back to your own mindset about the whole issue, is that you draw more of it than anybody else will.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we barely spent any time apart in that period, for her not to have noticed, particularly like on a first date, like I wasn't concerned about it, but it was there. It was making noises. I was having to go and empty it. I was having to leave the table or in the bar and things like that and go and sort things out. And it didn't seem unusual. It wasn't that, why are you always going to the right. I was able to go from first date to relationship with this person. And I mean, that might speak more about the person.
Could be, yeah. But what they're focused on.
Yeah, and I always remember one of the guys that I met in hospital whilst I was basically waiting for surgery, because I've been in hospital that long. The time that it came, the what is the word? Flash to bang between surgery being decided and surgery happening was very short in comparison to some people that I have met. So it was like literally 48 hours.
Wow. And
initially they'd talked about it and they'd said, similar to what your experience was, whilst I was in hospital, they said like us having surgery may become an option if these string of medications don't work.
Right.
So it was there in the background, but I was rejecting it. I was like, no, that's not happening. I don't want this. And then a guy who was similar in age to me was admitted onto my ward, and he had an ostomy, and the stoma nurse who was coming on, she stuck like a fake stoma and stuff on me so I could have a look and see what it would look like.
Really? Wow.
Showed me an ostomy bag, and this is what it is, and this is how you would cut it and do all that kind of jazz. But for me, I was like, all that stuff I can deal with that, but doesn't bother me with that. What bothers me is interacting in society. And that was my concern. It may have stemmed from a vanity sort of aspect of things, but the guy I spoke to, and I was like, how did you meet? Like, how do you meet a partner? Like, does it impact you? Like, your sex life? Does it get in the road? Does it make you feel less attractive as a person? And all those sort of types of things. And he was like, look, I think for him, it had been an epiphany where it just helped him realize who was important in his life. And he was saying that the people that you meet that can accept you for who you are the people that are worth having in your life. If you meet a girl or person that you want in your life, and they can't accept the ostomy, they're not worth having in your life in the first place. And I was like, well, it didn't hit me until I until he had said that. And he had met his wife after he had his ostomy, and he had kids and all that kind of stuff. And like, there was loads of irrational fears, but they were relative to the experience. So they may have been irrational. They may have never happened. But for you at that time, they are very real.
Right. And
he really did help to put a lot of them to bed and help me feel at ease with the situation. And I was just like, he's so right. If someone can't accept you for who you are, irrelevant of whether you've got IBD or a stoma or whatever, then they don't need to be in your life. There are plenty of people out there that will accept you. It can be very difficult to hear that when you're going through the process and feel alone, but there are people out there for you. It's just like, then I met my wife, and I was like, wow, it's true. You can have a relationship and have an ostomy and have all these things and be me and actually be happy.
That's awesome.
It's so moving on from that last question, what has been the best thing for you in getting an ostomy?
The best thing is the realization, kind of like what you were talking about there. It helped to clarify things a little bit. It also helped me realize that there's so much more that we're all capable of. And it actually took the stupid ostomy for me to actually try to push those boundaries and say, what if? What can I do? And so I need to develop that in other areas of my life, not just physical, because I think we're all capable of so much more. It's sort of like, I don't know if you've ever, how old is your oldest child again?
She's turning 5 next month.
Okay, so you'll probably be experiencing this, if you haven't already, a lot more. It's almost like that parent-child relationship. I think God looks at us sometimes and says, you have no idea of how much you're capable of, how much I love you for who you are, but how much you're capable of. And it's sometimes like that with your kids, where you're having to discipline them for something. And it's not that you're doing it out of anger, but it's almost sometimes like disappointment. Like, I know what you can do, and everybody screws up sometimes, but you are able to do so much more. And helping just people understand that in every aspect of their life. That's why I think I was drawn to CrossFit and running as much as I was, because helping people realize that look, you can do this. You may not be, there's always somebody faster, younger, smarter, better, but you can do great things yourself. And so it's taking it beyond the physical side of things and being able to do that in every aspect of your life. You can do it. You can be better. It may not be exactly the same, but that goes back to the comparison that you were talking about. You can do great things. And it's life is, unfortunately, it's not a contest. It's what you can do and how you can help others do the same thing. So that's what it's helped me realize. That's been the biggest blessing and benefit. And that's another reason why it's like, man, this thing helps keep me humble in a lot of ways, and helps me realize that there's so much more.
Yeah, it's true. It's strange that it almost has to be some form of extreme adversity to help people realize that you can do a lot.
Yeah,
and you can definitely do more than what you're doing right now. Yeah, I think based on our conversation, I'd just like to make sure that anybody who watches this feels comfortable to reach out to myself.
Yeah.
and just realize you're not alone. The situation that you're in is difficult, but it's not impossible. There is a whole life to be had with having IBD or even having an ostomy, and don't be afraid of it. Just there's a whole community out here, but also as well, like, people generally are very kind. People generally are very understanding, and are willing to listen to what is going on with you.
And don't give up. Even if you reach out to somebody and it doesn't go the way that you think, not everybody's like that. So don't let that color your ideas or everybody else for that. You know, maybe it was just that person. Don't give up.
For sure. Okay, guys, that has been CrohnsCast Live. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you can. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for your time.